Yeah, really. We just kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit. I heard about you through a couple books. I have my copy of UFOs in Wartime actually en route, so hopefully it'll be here in a couple of days. But I'm ex-military, and we're both huge fans of this whole UFO phenomenon thing. And I think the idea of UFOs like being involved or maybe seen more around like military activities and stuff is kind of interesting. So yeah, I'm curious as to like how you got started researching into that particular topic.
Right. Well, I've been writing full time for, more than 20 years. And most of the books I do are novels, military novels. So, but I was having lunch with my editor one day, and we were just throwing around ideas. And I had mentioned to him that when I was a kid, I just had this idea that it seems like UFOs were spotted more in wartime than in peacetime. I just remembered having that idea because I used to read a lot of UFO books growing up, and just mentioned it out of the blue. And he says, "Hey, that'd be a good book. Would you want to do it? It'd be a nonfiction book, though, which was different than what I had been doing." But I said, "Yes, okay." And it turned out to be a little bit more work than I thought, but it turned out well in the end. And that's really how it started. Just kind of have on this over this lunch conversation.
How many books have you written?
More than 50. More than 50. Yeah.
Wow. I was scrolling through all of them, and I was just like, how does he have the time?
Yeah. Well, when they give you a contract, you find the time. You can't turn anything down,
Sure.
Yeah. And you do a radio broadcast as well, right?
Right. Yeah. We do Mack Maloney's Military X-Files weekly show.
Which I listened to today, and it was awesome.
Really? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. It's high energy.
Is that where you spend most of your focus on, is like UFOs or the military UFO relationship?
Well, on the radio show, we talk about it a lot on, just in writing books and everything. I don't know if I'd ever write another book like that again, because I think we kind of did it. But it's the thing I'm most interested in, because it seems like, we've been doing the radio show now for 5 years, and we're always finding new stuff, always finding out new stories, new anecdotes, new instances with the military, new stuff, and covered it up and things like that. So it's a bottomless well when it comes to this subject.
Yeah. Do you think that straight away, do you think that the military is actively involved with this phenomenon, or they just happen to be there, and because of their activity, the phenomenon is happening?
I don't think that the U.S. military knows what UFOs are. They don't know any more than we do. They know they exist. They have plenty of evidence, and in UFOs in wartime, I mean, basically that's what it is just us presenting evidence of UFO sightings during wartime, and with the military's full knowledge that this stuff was happening. So, and they have film, they have photographs, so they know that UFOs exist. But I don't think anyone knows, military, government, civilians, anybody knows what UFOs are.
Yeah, that's crazy. Do they think that possibly, or what are the chances you think that this could be just technology from a different government, or is pretty much all governments essentially on the same page? As I just don't know.
Right. It would be very, very unusual if this was some other government. After World War II, when the Air Force really started looking into what were then called flying saucers, that was the main reason that they were looking into it, because they thought that the things that people saw flying in the sky were, Russian or Red Chinese secret weapons, But then they pretty quickly proved that wouldn't be true, because everybody's military, on Earth knows what everyone else's military is working on. And the United States is light years ahead of any other country as far as the technology is concerned. So for the Russians or the Chinese suddenly to have things that can defy the laws of aerodynamics,
Yeah.
it's really kind of highly unlikely, I think.
Okay. Well, I actually visited one of the websites for one of your books. I think it was UFOs in Wartime.
Mhm.
And the first thing that pops up are the 10 best UFO sighting videos. And I think it's like the first video. And the camera looks up and there's 2 jet fighters chasing a flying saucer. And they're
Right, yeah.
following it really close.
Right.
That to me, it made me think about just the possibility of our government engineering something like that.
Mhm.
Maybe that was like a test flight. I mean, that was the first impression that I got from the video.
Right.
How possible do you think that is?
Well, I can't, I can't, as far as the videos on that website, I can't vouch for whether they're photoshopped or not. But,
Sure.
again, I think that we would, what we talk about a lot on the show is, it all seems to go back to Roswell. What happened at Roswell, right? Which is, I'm sure you know the story of Roswell, right? The UFO crash that supposedly they recovered the UFO. And there's really nothing to that at all. I mean, that was just something that was all kind of made up by some UFO researchers for the National Enquirer in the 80s. But anyway, but what we always try to say is that if let's say the government had something from the Roswell crash, or if the U.S. government military, had technology from someplace other than Earth, I don't think we'd be living in the world we live in now. If they had, let's say, the secret to anti-gravity, just to take an example, and they've had it for years, why would they go through this whole charade of like launching the space shuttle? Billions and billions of dollars, and it's like launching a dump truck into space. It's expensive. It was dangerous. They didn't really do a whole lot. Why would you go through all that if you had somewhere else, the secret to anti-gravity, Yeah. So, and I think we'd all be like flying around in little jet belts and stuff, and we're not. So I think that whole idea that they might have, technology, reverse engineer technology from someplace else, I just don't buy it, because I think things would be better.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
I always found it interesting too, as I was like doing some research over the past like year or so, just kind of into UFOs and military, seeing the different instances in which people like see the UFOs. It's like the narrative, it's so hard to put like a narrative to why the occurrences or the sightings happen, because it seems like sometimes they intervene, sometimes they don't intervene. If they do intervene, sometimes it's for one side, sometimes it may be for the other. Have you ever been able to see like any link to any of them, or does it seem more random, all this stuff?
Yeah, it's random. A lot of it is random. In UFOs of Wartime, one thing is that in all the instances that we bring up, I think there's more than 200 stories in the book about different military UFO encounters. In no case do we have, or in very, very few cases, maybe one or two, but the rest, there's never any instance where the UFOs are attacking like our airplanes, our troops, or anything. There's no aggressive behavior in the vast majority of these instances we talk about. And so that leads me to believe or think that, that they're just kind of observing, a lot of times they're just there watching, and we come up with a theory that there might be time tourists from our future coming back to see time being made, and who knows,
Mm-hmm.
But as far as the randomness of UFOs and the randomness of UFO flight, back in the early 50s, the Air Force was investigating, in quotes, is more of just kind of a show game, but they had this thing called Project Blue Book, where they were supposedly looking into these things, and they really weren't. They would just basically solve the ones that they knew could be solved, like this was Venus, this was birds, whatever, and then the ones that couldn't be solved, they just wouldn't try to tackle them. But at one point, they were going to do a study on how UFOs moved, and moved. Do they move like a swarm of bees, just random helter-skelter, or do they move like a flock of geese where there's some kind of an intelligent movement to it, And the Pentagon decided not to fund the study, but when you look at it, it's kind of funny because they act in both ways, because people have seen UFOs just dotting all over the sky with no kind of intelligent movement, let's say. But then other times people have seen UFOs in long lines or chevrons, flying in formation. So it's just, one of the many mysteries, in the big mystery.
That's crazy. And how far back does this go as far as like any type of written record?
The book itself kind of takes, we use instances from the 20th centuries, from World War I to the first Gulf War. But there is a chapter in there that we have tell stories about UFO encounters all the way back to the Bible, to Alexander the Great, his people who, went with him on his conquests, reported stuff in the sky, and really all down through the ages. People have written books about how, there's so many UFOs just in the Bible, for instance. There's a good chance that, they've been with us and we've been around. We just talk about them more now, I think.
What is like your favorite, or not your favorite, but what would you think would be possibly one of the most interesting UFO encounters or UFO military encounters that you've come across?
Yeah, there's a lot of them, but my favorite, I do have a favorite, is it's called the Ganda Incident. And in the mid-50s, there was a Navy airplane flying from Europe to the United States, and it had 40 people on board, and they were all military people who were coming back to the United States for Christmas. So in this, the passengers and the crew, there were 3 or 4 flight crews, just passengers on the airplane, plus you had the flight crew itself. And there's this big kind of 4-engine airliner. Now, this is the mid-50s. So anyway, military airliner. So they're about an hour outside of Ganda, Newfoundland, where they're going to land, gas up, and then go to Maryland. And the crew sees these lights on the ocean below them. And they're so bright, and there's so many of them, they think that they're lost and they're actually going over a big city. But then they kind of confirm, where they are, and that they're looking down at lights on the ocean, on the Atlantic Ocean. So they call the 3 other air crews who were just passengers, pilots, co-pilots, navigators. They ask them to come up to the cockpit and look at what we're seeing here. Maybe you could tell us what it is. So now you have, a crowd of pilots. And pilots are the best witnesses to UFOs because they see everything. They know what Venus looks like. They know what the sun reflects. And when they see something they don't know, that's UFO. So anyway, now you have all these really good witnesses, and suddenly these lights formed a ring and came up off the ocean. And the next thing they know, there's this enormous flying saucer riding right beside them, pacing them for about a minute. And it was huge. It was like a half a mile wide. Now you have all these witnesses, and then the thing just takes off and it's gone. So anyway, the plane lands in Gander. The people on board are debriefed by Air Force intelligence people, even though it's a Navy plane. Then the Navy plane goes down the Paxatonic River in Maryland. That's the end of its flight. And it's a few days later, the pilot is contacted by a scientist from the Pentagon who has a big book, and he says to the pilot, please go look through these pictures and tell me what kind of UFO you saw. So, after the 5th or 6th page, the pilot says, hey, that's exactly what we saw. How do you have these pictures? And the guy says, I can't tell you. Boom, close the book, and he's gone. Now, that story is by Major Don Kehoe. He was a Marine major officer who wrote a lot about UFOs in the 50s. And you can find some really, really good not very well known UFO incidents in his books, Donald Kehoe. And I read them as a kid. And yeah, that's my favorite one because it has so many really good, credible witnesses.
Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, I was kind of just asking about if you had any issues. My concern was, or I guess I was thinking about how the military they're investigating and they'll talk to people, but they'll so quickly try to cover it up or keep information away from people. And I was wondering if you, in any of your research or anything, ran into a problem getting information from certain people, and why you think the reason for all that intense secrecy is.
You run into problems all the time. They're very reluctant and have been since really the late 40s to give up any kind of information having to do with UFOs. I'm talking about the military now, to the point where they and the CIA at one point in the early 50s, teamed together and started this whole thing that, where it's known as the Ridicule Factor, where they intentionally would plant newspaper stories when anyone would see UFOs, just to make it seem like they were kind of crazy. And that was just one of their kind of disinformation campaigns to take the focus off of the fact that, they're the U.S. military. Right now they have almost $1 trillion, defense budget, which is I'm all in favor of. But if there's something flying around out there that they can't identify, and it obviously is on a higher technological plane than we are, they're not going to come out and admit we don't know what this is, because then that $1 trillion, what's it good for if you can't protect us from this thing? Right. So it's just best. This is kind of like the excuse that the general consciousness of the UFO community has come up with. It's they can't admit that there's some kind of a security or intelligence failure, so they just keep it hidden. They look into them all the time. We know that, as we said. It turns out they'll deny it. Then 10 years later, it turns out they've been looking into it with this program, and then they shut that down. But they've been looking into it since the late 40s, and I know that they have a lot of evidence that they exist, but they don't. I am equally certain that they don't have any idea what they are, and that's why they're reluctant to share any of this, and why they're always so secret. Now, I should just point out real quick, the U.S. government is really the only government like this. The British Defense Ministry, released a lot of UFO files about 10 years ago. The French Defense Force, it openly investigates them. Belgium, same thing. Brazil, Australia, China, Russia. Russia, there was a time when if you were part of the military in Russia, you would get you were under orders that if you saw a UFO, you had to fill out a form and send it to the KGB. And because they just started like a database of what people were seeing, when and where. They just openly looked into what UFOs might be, but the U.S. government doesn't. And maybe they know a little bit more. Maybe they have a little more evidence or whatever, but I think it's just a hubris in a way. We can't admit that we don't know what's going on, so we're not going to admit anything at all.
That's what I was about to ask. Do you think it's pride, or is it fear of other people taking advantage of us? Or,
well, what would happen if they came out and said, these things exist, but we don't know what they are? The Navy came pretty close to that a couple of years ago when they released that TAC video and stuff.
Gimbal ones.
And it's very odd that the Navy was the one to do that, because of all the services, they're the ones who have been the most tight-lipped on UFOs and stuff. But think how it would be if they came out and said, these things exist. They can do fantastic things. We don't know what they are. We don't know if they're peaceful or not. Mm-hmm. That would be the chaos in the streets. Mm-hmm. That would really screw
I would always
up.
think, though, that if they did let it be known and they stopped like demonizing the idea of it or researching of it, then maybe we'd have more serious scientists looking into it, and maybe we could come to a solution a little bit quicker. I'm just frustrated that the idea that the government wants to make the decision on how people would react for the people, instead of, because people are pretty smart and they don't necessarily everybody work for the government.
Right.
I'd like to see some of those dudes.
Well, the government doesn't necessarily want everyone to be smart, It's better when
that's true.
But, it goes back to a story that we have in the book about Winston Churchill. During the war, British intelligence gave him this photograph, and it was a UFO. They called them Foo Fighters back then, but it's, what we call a UFO, a craft, and it was trailing this reconnaissance bomber out over the Atlantic. And he was presented this evidence, and he said, we have to lock this up for 50 years. He knew that it was something literally out of this world, right? And he says, we have to lock this up for 50 years. And he said, the reason why is that I think all religions would fail if we knew there were, entities from some other place. Because every religion on earth is based, on Earth, let's say. And,
Mm-hmm.
if all those religions kind of went down the drain, they take a lot of the social order with them. A lot of countries, the religion is the social order,
Yeah.
and if you suddenly took that away, yeah, maybe there would be problems. I don't know. But I agree with you. I think that people are smart enough to handle it. And I don't think it's up to the U.S. government or the U.S. military to withhold what could be the greatest, leap in mankind's history to discover that there are people from other places, So, but it's been like that for a long time. I don't see them really changing soon, though, that those Navy videos that they released, that was kind of surprising.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you think that that's possibly kind of going to be the trend going forward, and maybe we'll start seeing more and more of these from them? Maybe it's like kind of like soft disclosure to test the waters to see if people can handle it.
Yeah, the drip thing.
Yeah.
I'd say yes and no. And I'd say if they were going to, do the soft announcement, let's say, that would be the way to do it, just to kind of leak a video here and there and one of these and so on. But we never talk politics on the show, and I never really talk politics ever. But if the U.S. government knew what UFOs are, we would know now. We would have known in a tweet. You know what I mean? We would have known in a tweet 4 years ago.
Yeah.
If he was briefed on it, and the personality of him, he'd want to be the first president to announce what UFOs are.
Oh yeah, 100%.
He'd love that. It didn't happen. So either they don't know, or not every president is briefed on everything too. That's another thing. Is one of the people on our show is an ex Army counterintelligence guy, but he worked for a company that worked for the CIA and the FBI. And this guy's he's on the level. And the way that he looks at he just kind of sees the entire military kind of bureaucracy and everything, and for you to the way he puts it is, if they were studying UFOs, they could lose it. Do you know what I mean? They could compartmentalize it. And you don't have to tell every secret to the president. You tell him secrets that, affect our national security, immediately or whatever. But not every president knows everything. And I think that's a situation we just went through for the past 4 years. Now, what's going to happen in the next 4 years? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just going to be 4 more years of nothing.
Probably.
And the other thing I just want to add too is there's a good chance that when UFOs are figured out, whatever they are, it's not going to come from the United States. There's a good chance it's going to come from China, because China is really now ascending to stuff like that. They sent a lander to the moon.
Yep.
They're bringing back samples. They're going to put men on the moon in a few years. And they don't have any problem with coming out and saying, that they're looking into UFOs. There's a lot of research over there into the evidence of UFOs. They're not afraid of it like we are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's going to be someone else other than an American is going to be the one that's going to finally come forward and say, UFOs are this.
Game changer. I can't wait for that.
That's
So what do you
interesting.
think this stuff? So do you personally believe that UFOs are like extraterrestrial from a different planet?
They're from somewhere else.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily have to be from a different planet. There's a good chance, the time travel aspect is actually, as good a chance as they're from another planet, I think, because, when you really just look at the distances physically between planets, we can't reach the nearest star to us in something that brings us to the moon. It's a whole different kind of technology to move around. And I think move around space. And I think it has to be through stuff like wormholes or dimensions. Who knows? We can make up anything and say that's what it is. But they're definitely from a different time, let's say, if not a different place, I think.
Do you think it's like, do you think it would be the same? How am I trying to word this? Like the same people or the same entities, or do you think that is also could be like spread out over different places or times? Like, I don't know, would it be just humans in a different place, or is it like humans and this other type of living thing traveling, however, and another type of living thing?
Well, it's like, who knows,
Yeah.
I mean, if they were from our time, there's actually a study in science called, I think it's called epinology or something. And what it is it's a weird scientific thing to study, but they have found that as species grow older over millions and millions of years, they start to revert back to looking like fetuses, as odd as that sounds, okay? And when you look at a gray alien, what people call a gray alien with the big head and the little hands and stuff, the big eyes, they kind of look fetus-like in a way, which would lead some people to believe that they are humans from the future. But, it's just all speculation. It's just all speculation. And I just think that maybe, humans are not at the intelligence level right now to understand what they are. Just like 500 years ago, people didn't know what lightning was, they thought it was the finger of God. But, accumulated knowledge, civilization realizes that, that's a natural thing, so on and so forth. Maybe this is something natural. Maybe this is some kind of mass hysteria, something, or, maybe it's a universe running right alongside of ours, a parallel universe, and things are a little bit different over there. Who knows? But again, it's fun to speculate, but it's definitely all speculation.
Now, have any of these UFOs, or how many times have they actually participated in this like wartime thing? Like, have they intervened at all in any situation, stopped something from happening, caused something to happen?
Not really. We just, again, going back to the stories we talk about in the book, it's 99% of them are just kind of observing. There is an incident that happened during the Gulf War where we had a story where there was an F-16 fired at some kind of an unknown object, and the thing supposedly fired back. But in the heat of war, I mean, unidentified object doesn't necessarily mean an unidentified flying object, a flying saucer, whatever. It could be just an enemy plane. You don't know what kind it is or whatever, Yep.
Sure.
But
so I've heard stories of like Vietnam and soldiers in the middle of battle seeing UFOs. What portion of these are in the midst of battle?
Yeah, it turns out a lot of them, and you're right, a lot of reports from Vietnam, but even like going back to World War II, I mean, the first Foo Fighters were seen by crews on, RAF bombers bombing German cities at night in the middle of this, just craziness. They'd see these craft riding alongside them. In Vietnam, there's a lot of stories, but once again, you have a lot of stuff flying around up there. You have all kinds of jets and helicopters, and they used a lot of drones in Vietnam, not the drones like we think of today, but like unpiloted kind of little airplanes and stuff. So you see a lot of stuff flying around up there, and that's what I think the whole premise of the whole UFOs in wartime is. Do people see these things more in wartime because there's just more people flying around, there's more people looking up in the sky, there's more radar turned on, I don't know, but to your point, in Vietnam, there was just so many really crazy stories having to do with UFOs, and with there's a very quickly, there's one where there was a lot of UFO activity over the DMZ, which is the area the demilitarized zone that separated North Vietnam and South Vietnam. And they would see a lot of these lights over the DMZ. So this is in 68. So they moved a squadron of F-4 Phantoms right up to the DMZ. One night they saw these lights. They went up to intercept them, and they were chasing these lights over the Gulf of Tonkin. They fired on them, and their Sidewinder missiles actually hit an Australian destroyer and killed 3 sailors and wounded about 40 of them, and basically put the ship out of action. Now, they were shooting at these unknown objects. It was a big story in Australia, but it was hardly mentioned in the United States. And that ship was eventually just had to be retired from service because it was so damaged. But lots of stories like that in Vietnam. And again, I want to say that there's a lot of technology flying around back then. A lot of things could be seen in the sky, could be mistaken. But, you know, when you have our planes shooting at things and hitting one of our allied ships, you know, something has gone wrong, you know?
Yeah. Man, I always took those wartime stories. Sometimes there's like two ways you can look at it. It could just be severe trauma, you know. Sometimes I think that they're just experiencing something because, you know, I've been to Iraq twice, and some of the things like, you get pretty worked up in some instances. But I do also know that in those instances, adrenaline starts happening, and you become really hyper aware of your surroundings. And I've seen soldiers be able to notice things and do things that are just like you wouldn't even think you could do under that type of pressure situation. So you could look at it like it's like a traumatic thing that they're just hallucinating. But I tend to think like these dudes are like, they're pretty perceptive in that moment, you know?
Yep. Yeah. It'd be a strange time to see a UFO. I mean, I hate to keep referring back to the book, but, you know, there are stories during D-Day, the landings on Normandy, where it was just like, you know, hours and hours, just complete confusion and, you know, battle and explosions and just everything. And people on the landing ship seeing like UFOs flying in and around all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just an odd time to see a UFO. And it just comes back to this idea that we have that, you know, they're looking in on us, you know, they're looking in on us to see history being made. We talked to someone the other day, and she said if she had a chance, she'd want to come back and see a Shakespeare play. If you had a chance to be a time tourist, okay? And now the people say they come back and see the crucifixion. Well, then people will say, well, why aren't there 4 million people at the crucifixion? Why aren't there millions of people at a Shakespeare play? You know, and then you go into this whole thing, well, it might be a multiverse, and there's an infinite number of universes. And if you can go just to the right one, you'll be just someone in the crowd at a Shakespeare play. Who knows? Who knows, you know? One of the things that happened in the whole UFO, you know, lore is if you put in that component that they might be time machines, you know, some of the math works out a little bit, as they say.
Yeah, I kind of like that idea too. I lean sometimes towards that time travel thing. They'd be traveling to the weirdest times, because I'm always like, the ones that always get me is the when they're around like nuclear weapons or like testing of some kind. It's like, why would we travel back to that unless to try to stop something or.
Right. Well, you know, there's a lot of evidence to that too. In the late 60s and 70s, when the U.S. military were building the silos for our ICBM missiles back then, and they built hundreds of these silos out in the middle part of the country, from New Mexico all the way up to North Dakota. And there were instances where there was so much UFO activity at some of these places that the guards refused to go out at night, that they were, you know, suffering from, you know, anxiety, let's say. There are instances where UFOs were seen over these silos and changed the targeting data, or, you know, caused the power to go out on multiple silos at once. And Peter Jennings, who was a pretty respected news reporter years ago, who's passed away now, but he worked for ABC News. He actually did a 3-hour documentary in the 80s, I think, which was really good because it talked a lot about this, how the Pentagon knew about it. These things are happening almost every night. They put in every report, they refer to them as unknown helicopters, but they have pictures and instances, you know, just recorded instances where these things would fly over these silos, shut off 15, 16 of them at a blink and turn them back on again. And it is almost, as you say, someone saying to us, we know you have these things, you have to know that we can turn them off. I mean, I'd love to think that there is some, you know, angel force looking in on us and will prevent us from having nuclear war. But these things, who knows what the reason is, but these things happen. They happened, and no one's ever been able to explain them.
There's an instance here. We're up in Montana, and Malmstrom Air Force Base.
Yeah, Malmstrom Air Force Base.
Yeah. Yep.
Lots of stories from there. Lots of
Yeah.
stories from there. Shutting off. At one point, I think they shut off like a third of the power to those missile silos. And, that's a big chunk of us, national security. If the Russians or someone was doing that, people would go crazy. But there were these UFOs. They couldn't figure it out. Very few people know about it.
That's so nutty. What do you think? So do you think the creation of this branch of the military called the Space Force is to start exploring that more? Or do you think it's just purely national security like they're expressing to the public?
I think it's just an excuse to manufacture new uniforms with cool patches on them.
Yeah.
We already had a Space Force. We already had
part of the Air Force, right?
Right. The people who run NORAD and the satellites and stuff, I mean, they literally are Space Command. It's been around for a long time.
No.
Yeah, I mean, if how the military, the U.S. military is studying them now, I'm trying to pick my words carefully. They're probably contracting it out, like they contract a lot of stuff out now. And it's easier to kind of hide the paper trail, and so the one of the people who are on our show a lot, the guy who we say, he worked for the agency that works for the agencies. There are a lot of these kind of companies out there. They're private. They're like spy schools in a way, but they're privately run. They're funded by the government, and you can just bury anything at these places. And I think that's probably where UFOs and who knows what else that the government is looking into that, we don't know about, different kinds of energy and that kind of stuff. If you contract it out, it makes the paper trail that much harder to follow. And I think if anything's going on now, that's what they're doing.
Yeah. What's some current, are those gimbal videos or those ones that the Navy Pentagon released a while back? Are those like the most recent big sightings, or have there been some since then?
Probably been some since then. Right, they're the last ones that they released, and they were in 2016. And we had a guy on our show 2 weeks ago who was on the USS Teddy Roosevelt, which were where the planes from the on the East Coast sightings, which is the gimbal sightings. That's where they were launched from, and he said that. The entire crew was told to kind of, keep it on the down low. But when that was happening, it freaked a lot of people out because, they knew of the Tic Tac sightings, but they were in 2004 and they're in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. And, if anyone wanted to blame anyone, I suppose you could blame the Chinese or something, though obviously it wasn't them. But to see something on our East Coast, closer to our shores, he says it freaked a lot of people out. Everyone's, said, we don't want to talk about this, but, on a ship, everyone knows everything, really. And he said it was really a time of high anxiety. No one really knew what was going on.
Wow. Yeah, actually, I think that's the episode I listened to today. It was a great episode.
Yeah, he was this guy was a cryptologist on the Teddy Roosevelt, and he told us stuff off air that it was really kind of nutty. But this whole idea that's why it's so strange that the Navy released these videos. It's very strange that they did that. And I mean, the videos were out there floating around anyway, but the fact is that the Navy kind of sanctioned them and said, these are legitimate when they didn't have to. That's very odd. That's odd.
Why do you think that's so odd?
I don't know. I just that once again, the Navy has never released any kind of files, even from World War II, on quote unquote Foo Fighters. I mean, they're very, very tight-lipped. The Navy traditionally is very tight-lipped. And why they would come out, and that's what we're saying is, in all this time, and in all this kind of crazy stuff that happened in the past 4 years, why now would you kind of admit that, yeah, hey, we don't know what these things are? We talk about it a lot on the show, a lot of theories and so on, but it's just a very strange thing for the Navy to do.
What do you think?
I don't know. Like you said, maybe they're setting us up for a soft landing, but I think the soft landing would have come by now. I mean, the soft landing meaning, we know what UFOs are via tweet.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just in again, when the guy who was on the show, he says when it was happening, and the videos came out like 2 years later. He says when it was happening, it was high anxiety. It was something that you usually would want to keep secret, but they didn't. I don't know why. Someday we'll find out why, but at this moment, who knows why?
I think it's because the country was going through a lot at the time, and it was an easy time to just put it out there and then let the public just kind of forget about it on their own. So then later on they could be like, well, we told you.
We told you.
At the time, you chose to ignore it. Guess you didn't care.
I can give you one other cynical theory, okay? Yeah. When they first showed the Tic Tac video, it was right around this time, 2 years ago, 2018, and the first network news show to show it was ABC Morning News, and Good Morning America. Now, that's when I saw it, and when they came back to the studio, I hate to use this term, but the news bimbo goes, I thought I saw the Millennium Falcon. That looked like the Millennium Falcon to me. Now, Millennium Falcon, now ABC is owned by Disney. Disney was putting out their first version of Star Trek that week. That week. She got a chance to say, Millennium Falcon, ha, ha, ha. Everyone laughs, but you got a plug for the new Star Wars movie. Who knows? Maybe Disney's behind it all. Who knows,
I wouldn't be surprised they're behind everything.
Yeah, Disney is, yeah. We've had some dealings with Disney. I'm not, we can talk about them off here, but man, they are.
Wow.
I wouldn't be surprised either.
I understand.
Yeah.
That's crazy to think too, that they just so easily, man, these guys
manipulate.
Twisted, dude. Yeah.
It was a big hit. Everyone went to see the movie. So
I don't know how you feel about the government, but I'm not necessarily a huge fan, which is why I'm a civilian now and no longer.
Right. I mean, I respect veterans. We talk a lot about veterans on our show, and veterans are not. They're not given the respect that they should in this country, and it's really sad. It's really sad. I have personal experiences in my family, my wife's family, where when the Veterans Administration was supposed to come through, they didn't. And a lot of money is spent. I mean, other than defense and social programs, Veterans Administration gets billions of dollars, and it's just not spent, properly.
Right.
That's my beef.
Right.
That's my beef. That's my major beef with the government. Everything else is politics.
Yeah.
But these are people's lives that you should be affecting. You should be taking care of these people, and they're not. Not to use Russia as an example, but after World War II, anyone who was a veteran of World War II in Russia got a little red pin, okay? And, Russia being where it is and what it is, you had to wait for hours to get bread and food and to get into everything's a line. But if you had that little red pin, you went to the head of the line. That's how they respected their veterans. And if Russia treats their veterans better than ours, then, we got a problem. Yeah, so that's why that's my beef with the government.
Yeah, I'm with you. One of my really good friends couldn't walk for like a year because the VA took so long to get his back surgery scheduled.
Yeah,
he literally lost his job waiting for the surgery.
Yep. I mean, a horror story. My wife's father, if you can believe this, he was the youngest Marine to land on Okinawa in World War II. He's 15 years old. Lied about his age.
That is crazy.
After the war, went back to school and had to do his senior year in high school. And he had already fought in World War II. Okay.
Oh my God.
In the Marines. He's Marines. He was a Marine to the end. And he was in hospice when they were supposed to be helping out, and they were missing in action. They lost all his paperwork. They were terrible. They were just horrible. And I'll never forget that. That's unforgivable. It really is. And that's just one little horror story. Like you say, your friend waiting and waiting and waiting. If you're in their hands, you're kind of screwed. I hate to say it.
Yeah.
They should be getting the best care ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, you hear stories of soldiers trying to adapt back to society after war. And you can't even imagine what it's like at 15 years old
Crazy.
to fighting in a war and then just going back to high school one day. That's insane.
Yeah. Yep. And the funny thing is that he never told his kids. He never told any of them. And just one day, after, I married his daughter, we were just sitting around, and I said, I understand you're in the Marines, and he told me the whole story. And, and it wasn't pretty on Okinawa. It was really bad, just really bad. And then, he comes back he lived on Long Island, and he comes back to the high school, and they said, you have to do your senior year, but you can't play baseball because you're too much of a man. He says, the only reason I went back is to play baseball. And they wouldn't let him play baseball. No one talked to him. His whole senior year, people just,
Wow.
Yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy. But he lived a good life after it, like you say, Marine to the end. But they disappointed him. The Veterans Administration disappointed him at the end. Never forgive him for that. That is just uncalled for. And it's just one of millions of stories. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And that sucks. It just makes me so mad. I just want to shake
Right.
somebody.
But,
Okay. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say one thing to just give a plug. Our official charity on our show is this outfit called Homes for Our Troops. They're in Massachusetts. And what they do is they take contributions and they build houses for people who have been wounded in the Afghani war and also Iraq. And they build houses that are adapted for people, as you say, who might come home without legs or arms or stuff, right? They make everything convenient and easy to reach and go upstairs and down the works. And they give them the house. No mortgage, nothing. Here's the keys.
Wow.
They've already built like 450 of these houses. We've had a brigadier general on our show. We gave him a lot of crap, just fooling around. Yeah. But he's like the head of this organization, Homes for Our Troops. So just Google them and see all the good work that they do.
Wow.
I'll make sure I link that too, because I think that's super rad.
And you said you could find that on your show?
Yeah, that's when we do the plugs. They're our first plug all the time. Homes for Our Troops. Yeah, they're good. And I think 88 cents on every dollar you donate goes to the veterans.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
We got a quick education on charities, and 88 cents is very, very high. Yeah. A lot of charities are 50-50. They take 50 and 50 goes, or even less. But these people, they're straight. They're really on the level. So, yeah, we support them a lot. Homes for Our Troops.
Mac, real quick, where can we find your show?
The best thing to do is just Google us, Mack Maloney's Military X-Files. We're on like 26 different podcast platforms.
Cool.
And on about 7 different internet networks, and we're on Armed Forces Radio. We're very, very big in England for some reason. Just Google Mack Maloney's Military X-Files and you'll find us.
All right.
I do have a question, actually.
Okay.
Did any of these reports ever have anything other than just the craft? Like, have there been, as far as like with the military specific sightings, anything ever with entities themselves or beings, or has it always just pretty much strictly been craft?
Right. Like a lot of civilian encounters, people see, beings, that's the whole close encounters of the third and fourth kind now. When it's in military, instances, because they're very secretive about what really happened, if their troops came in contact with other entities, we wouldn't really know it, But, there are instances where, people have seen, craft land entities come out of them. They always seem like they're fixing the ship for some reason, but there's never any of these stories where, nothing like a scene from the day the earth stood still or anything where there's a confrontation or anything. They just, the misconception is that UFOs hide from us. They don't. They're around all the time. People see them all the time, but they're always just kind of hanging there, No one is really quite sure what they're doing. In every military incident that we have, like in the book, there's no instances where anyone has like kind of met up with whoever is flying the Foo Fighters, whatever.
Mhm. Bummer. I was kind of going to like land, pick up some guns, help one side, do something.
Land on the White House lawn,
Yeah.
Another theory that kind of lends itself to this time travel theory is that, let's say they are time travelers, so they know what our future is. So they might know that, in the year 2026, January 1st, that the first definitive video photo of a UFO is finally revealed. Well, then if that's the case, then they can do anything they want up until that date, because they'll know we don't know what they are until then. So they get, one of the people on our show, a regular guest, he was in the Coast Guard, and he was stationed down in Antarctica, of all places. Okay, he met his wife in Antarctica.
What?
And at those kind of research stations down there, they saw stuff all the time. And there aren't very many like airliners or any planes flying over the South Pole. It's a little out of the way, He says we saw stuff like all the time, but as far as landing
about Antarctica.
Oh yeah, it's kind of a hot spot.
Yeah, it really is. And it's huge. People look at it and they think it's like the North Pole, but it isn't. It's enormous. And he says lots of strange stuff would just happen down there. Lots of really odd stuff in the sky.
Oh, that's fascinating. Have you ever had any experiences?
No. That's another strange thing we talk about on the show a lot, is that I feel that certain people will see UFOs and certain people won't. And I feel I am someone who won't,
Honestly, Mac, I feel like I'm right there with you.
Yeah. I just don't see, maybe because I look for them too much. The closest we came is that we live on the beach, and we were down at the beach one day, and there's marshes kind of around us, and we saw these two sets of lights blinking, yellow, red, amber, yellow, just blinking like crazy, coming right towards us. And I just said, wow, this is it. What could these things be other than UFOs? And they went right over our heads, and they were medevac helicopters going to the hospital in the city near us. Now, if they were a football field away from us, I would have said, yeah, I saw UFOs. I was down the beach once, and these two lights went by. We don't know what they are, but, we know what they are. I just think there's a certain kind of people that UFOs reveal themselves to, or something. And I don't know why, I've never seen a ghost either, so.
It's a real bummer, because people like us tend to be very, very much wanting to see this. Like,
right. Yeah. It's almost like you're looking for it.
Yeah.
You're looking too hard for it,
Yeah.
Maybe I should be more afraid of it or something. I don't know.
Yeah. A ghost is something I've always wanted to experience. I've always wanted to have a ghost encounter, and I've never had one.
Yeah,
you guys talk about paranormal stuff on your show, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Do you have? Good.
I was just going to say, our show is just, it's not your typical UFO show. Like we have like top 10 favorite UFO movies, written, read on there by like the barmaid from our local bar. We do live shows from our favorite bar. So it's different. Yeah, we have like rock stars on and stuff. We have like athletes on. So it's not always about military UFOs,
Sure.
But we do, about half every show, we do try to, go back to what we're supposed to be doing. But high energy is what they call us. So
that's awesome.
We have fun with it. So we do a lot of paranormal stuff. We do Ouija board stuff. We have a guy on, a regular guest on our show, is the guy who owns the company that makes Ouija boards. And Ouija boards are really screwed up, man. Some of the stories we hear about Ouija boards are.
Is that guy afraid of Ouija boards?
He won't play them.
Oh,
he won't play them. Yeah. He will not play them.
You would think that makes it doesn't play. You should probably not play that thing.
Yeah. Yep. And we always say to him, well, why Ouija boards? Why isn't chutes and ladders? why isn't that a portal to hell? But anytime he's on, we get someone on, we try to get someone on who has this really strange story about Ouija boards. And it's usually some chick sorry, but it's usually some, girl who, a bunch of young teenage girls get together for their first sleepover, and they do the Ouija board, and, they wind up screwed up for the rest of their lives or something, So, yeah.
Do you think, just personally, like any paranormal like reports in the military, do you think those are like one and the same with the UFO phenomenon, or do you kind of draw the line between them like they're two distinct stories or encounters?
No, we talk a lot about what we call the unified field theory of the paranormal. Okay, it's something we made up. The name we made up, but a lot of researchers have had this theory before, is that UFOs and ghosts and Bigfoot and Loch Ness Monster, that's all part of the same thing. That it's all part of the same thing, And in a way, you think, well, yeah, we live in a, we live a normal existence in what we figure is our normal existence. Things go wrong, things go right, and so on. Okay, but maybe this isn't. Maybe we're just one of millions and millions of universes. I mean, that's what the theory is. And maybe just in our universe, these weird things happen that we don't understand. Maybe the universe next door, oh, it's a UFO. It's because they're from a, maybe we live in the haunted universe and everything else is okay. It makes it interesting, but the fact there's a good chance that it is all part of the same thing. It could be psychological. We don't know, but there's been pictures of some guy in California a couple of years ago. He took a picture of what looks like a ghost in a window of literally a haunted house. And there's a UFO in the picture as well. And that's kind of odd, I mean, a ghost and a UFO in the same photograph.
And here we are trying to see one of those.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. So, there's a good chance it's all part of the same thing. What that thing is, who knows?
Oh man. Hopefully we'll find out before I'm too old.
Yeah, before we die.
Yeah.
Maybe before the end of 2020.
Right.
Yeah, maybe that.
Yeah,
too.
you never know.
Well, hey man, thanks for doing this. I appreciate you coming on.
Sorry for the glitch.
Oh, no worries.
Oh, no worries.
Fix that in post.
Okay. So how long do you guys been doing this?
We actually just started this year, about 2 months ago. We've been working on a podcast for the last year, trying to figure out exactly kind of what we wanted to focus on.
Right.
And now we want to talk about paranormal and UFOs and cryptids and just things like fringe topics.
I mean, that's what we've been trying to do all along. We just haven't gotten there yet until now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, we talk a lot about cryptids on our show too. One of the guys who's a co-host, he's big into Mothman. I don't know if you've ever heard of Mothman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Mothman. This guy's an expert on Mothman.
He's big up where you guys are at, huh?
Yeah, we like he goes down to Mothman, down to wherever that town is in West Virginia, like maybe once a month, and does.
Really?
Mothman's a really, really interesting story. So many people saw this thing flying around. Once again, they all can't be lying. They all can't be hoaxing, So anyway, you like cryptids.
There's too many cool stuff out there.
Yeah. Well, there's, like I say, it's a bottomless well, man. Once you get into it, you're always finding new stuff.
Well, hey, thanks again. I'll love to have you on again sometime. We'll talk about anything, pretty much.
Mac, real quick before we end, let's just give a quick wrap up on where we can find your stuff, your books, your show.
It's MackMaloney.com. MackMaloney.com is just Google that, go to a webpage, and it talks about the radio show and books and, everything else. MackMaloney.com.
All right.
Awesome. And we'll link all that stuff too, so everybody can just kind of click their way through all your stuff.
Cool. All right, well, thanks, guys.
Hey,
cool.
thanks,
you
Mac.
very much, man. Have a great day.
Okay, we'll talk soon.
All right, see ya.
All right, Mac. Thank you.
Yeah, bye.